iPhone 16 Pro Max versus Samsung Galaxy S24 Ultra versus Google Pixel 9 Pro XL. The answer, in my opinion, is very obvious. I've split this comparison into 9 key areas to hopefully help you decide which is the best option for you. I've awarded 3 points for a top placing finish in each category, 2 points for second and 1 point for third. And if there's a tie for the first, for example, they will all get 3 points. And one final thing to remember is the majority of this test is objective, i.e. we're talking straight facts, but some parts are a little bit more subjective. So feel free to follow along, scoring it yourself, and definitely let me know in the comments what scores you end up with and which phone takes your crown. First up, camera, with the first set of points being awarded on video and the second on photos. All of the following was shot on default camera settings, as I feel it's the fairest way of showcasing the end results for 90% of people who will just simply pick up their phones, turn them on and shoot. And that's take photos, not turn into a Wild West character. Now, video on the iPhone 15 Pro Max was arguably on par with the S24 Ultra and Pixel 9 Pro XL, so you would expect the 16 Pro Max to blow them out of the water, right? Well, in some circumstances, yes, but in others, it's not so clear-cut. Let's take audio, for example. So this is testing the audio coming out of the 3 phones. Firstly, the iPhone 16 Pro Max, then the S24 Ultra. How does that sound? And then we go to the Pixel 9 Pro XL. Now, a lot of work has gone into all 3 of these phones, video and audio, but who's done it the best? It's seriously impressive, especially when you select the studio option in audio mix, which you can do even after recording, which is wild. I honestly think this might actually make me rethink the need for a lav mic when capturing content on the fly. I was also really impressed with the audio on the Pixel with its speech enhancement feature, and found both the iPhone and the Pixel to be substantially better than on the Samsung phone. However, when it comes to vlogging and portrait video, the S24 Ultra just looks more natural. Colours seem more realistic over the iPhone, and unfortunately there doesn't seem to be a portrait mode or blurred video option on the Pixel's front camera, only on the rear, which in 2024 seems a bit strange. Unless I've missed it somewhere and then I'm strange, which is probably more likely. If we flip to the rear, stabilisation on all 3 is incredible and extremely hard to tell them apart. Slight warping every now and again, but you can tell that all 3 companies have put a lot of work into video performance. You can shoot 8K footage at 30 FPS on the 2 Androids, so videos can be higher res if you get the conditions right, but 4K 120 FPS is now present on the iPhone to the max 60 on the Android devices. So do you want higher res or a smoother shot for action and slow-mo? And the iPhone does just seem to be slightly more consistent across the board. The S24 Ultra and the Pixel 9 Pro XL can be excellent, but also slightly subpar on occasions. And the slow-mo is now better on the iPhone too, since it's jumped to match the S24 Ultra's 4K from 1080p like on the Pixel, and the end result just feels more polished over the 2 Android devices. But photos are a different story, and to best put each system through its paces, I decided to take a trip to Lake Como in Italy to fully compare them, and some of the results were really interesting. The first thing that is obvious is that we've come a long way in smartphone photography. These are all excellent, but there are subtle differences that you will need to know. In terms of camera specs, the 16 Pro Max and the 9 Pro XL have a triple camera array, main, ultra-wide and periscope telephoto with 5x optical zoom, but the S24 Ultra has an additional 3x optical telephoto lens in its quad camera. And the results of this means that not only can it zoom in further at 100x than the 30 on the Pixel and 25 on the iPhone, but images taken between 3 and 5x can utilise sharper optical zoom over the digital zoom options on the Pixel and iPhone, and portraits have more options too. Samsung phone can do 1, 2, 3 and 5x to the 1, 2 and 5 on the iPhone, and 1.5 and 2 on the Pixel. Now personally, for portrait shots, I like the 3 and 5x, and I find the 1.5 and 2 configuration a little bit of a strange choice from Google. The S24 Ultra with that added flexibility is in a class of its own here. And the same rings true for selfies too. The S24 Ultra just has a much more natural background blur where you can kind of see the stuff going on behind, but there's a nice natural fall off compared to the slightly artificial and overly blurred Pixel and iPhone shots. And slightly green tinge aside sometimes, the S24 Ultra just tends to take the best portraits and selfies in my opinion. The Pixel 9 Pro XL often offers great portrait details, but edge detection could definitely be improved, with the iPhone in my opinion still not being able to provide the most realistic skin colours, especially in certain warmer, sunny environments. The red in the skin tones can make your face appear like it's on fire, like a kind of scene from Terminator. One only clear downside of the S24 Ultra is it still suffers from slightly slow shutter speed, meaning motion blur can be an issue when there's movement in the scene as shown here. And the iPhone, which has seen an improvement in this department, is able to snap crystal clear images even with movement, matching the Pixel, which was always elite in this department, as it always has done a lot of its processing using software in post. You do have high megapixel modes on all, 200 on the S24 Ultra, 48 on the iPhone and 50 on the Pixel, which can look great in the right circumstances. However, due to the often slower shutter speeds and longer processing, I tend to often stay on default. And then there's low light shots. I shot all of these in standard photo mode, but each phone senses low light and allows for a slower shutter to let in more light. But some phones do this better than others. The iPhone tends to look the most realistic. Night shots look like night, which is great. That's kind of what you want. But as a result, they can sometimes look a little too dark in some places, with the other two looking more social media friendly and more eye-catching. I think the Pixel 9 Pro XL probably just about pips the S24 Ultra here, but they are both very similar indeed. Ultra-wide angle is wider on the iPhone, so you can fit more in the scene, but it does feel more fisheye and distorted looking, but also shows much more detail now when cropping due to that upgraded 48 megapixel lens from the 12 megapixels before. It's also probably the most realistic when it comes to color reproduction, with the S24 Ultra probably the least detailed and the most saturated. HDR excellent on all three. Sometimes it's quite hard to choose a winner in this department. Personally, across the board, I think the S24 Ultra is probably the most consistent and offers a greater variety of options, with the Pixel 9 Pro XL right up there too, just falling a little short when it comes to zoom options and not offering a 3 or 5x portrait. Now, there's no secret that each of these phones is excellently made, true top-tier flagships. There is also no secret that designs will be copied, or at least inspired by, cue these. The biggest form of flattery. Similar colour schemes, similar sharp lines and feel, with the Pixel and the iPhone looking almost identical. All three are made of metal and glass, although the iPhone and Samsung have titanium frames and second-gen ceramic shield and Gorilla Armor glass respectively, to the aluminium and Victus 2 on the Pixel, meaning in principle the Pixel should be slightly less durable. The S24 Ultra is slightly more rounded, meaning it's ever so slightly more comfortable resting in the hand, although take that with a pinch of salt because it is actually taller than the other two, so therefore more slippery as a result. Way! Although again, almost all are impossible to use most of the time with one hand. Subjectively, I slightly prefer the look of the S24 Ultra, with the iPhone taking second, because obviously it's been the first mover in this style of design when it comes to the Pixel, and the added durability really is the main key factor here. But what if we flip to the front? Do we have a more objective winner? Well, yes and no. All three are incredible display panels, 6.8 inch on the Samsung and the Pixel and 6.9 on the iPhone, and all have 120Hz LTPO AMOLED or OLED technology. The iPhone has a marginally higher screen-to-body ratio with those new upgraded incredibly slim bezels, but the dynamic island, while really useful for some, does cut into the viewing experience and feels more obstructive. The S24 Ultra feels the least obstructed, as it has the smallest front camera cutout and the highest PPI, 505 to the Pixel's 486 and the iPhone's 460. The iPhone also has the lowest max peak brightness at 2000 nits to the 2600 on the S24 Ultra and a whopping 3000 on the Pixel, although in everyday use at full brightness, I can't really tell the difference. Realistically, tomato on this one, but for content consumption and gaming, I would probably just edge it Samsung. But what of gaming and performance in general? Well, in terms of raw numbers, in the last few years, it has been a bit of a landslide for Apple with their Bionic chips. They've always kind of left Android a little bit in the dust. And that still kind of rings true here, with Geekbench CPU scores from the new A18 Pro chip giving 3,403 single-core and 8,438 multi. The S24 Ultra with its Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 chip, while still showing incredible prowess with scores of 2,079 and 6,691 respectively, still falls short of Apple, and falling further behind is the Google Pixel 9 Pro XL. Google have their in-house Tensor G4 chip here and have made great strides to close that gap on the other two, but they are still behind with a single core score of 1,999, 4,696 multi. CPU is just one aspect of performance though, and I wanted to test more GPU intensive tasks and how the phones would stand up to things like gaming. For this, I used the new cross-platform 3D Mark Steel Nomad Lite stress test, which, according to the developers, is a very accurate showcase of GPU performance. What this test clearly shows is that the S24 Ultra is capable of higher boosts of performance for short timeframes, with higher best loop scores than the other two, with the iPhone in second and the Pixel third. But the Samsung phone also shows a much lower stability score, with a worse lower loop score than the iPhone and only marginally higher than the Pixel. What this equates to is that, yes, peak performance on gaming sessions might be higher on the S24 Ultra, but it will also fluctuate more, and you may have periods of some not so slick gameplay. This was backed up by SolarBay, which is a 20-minute stress test that shows how a device will perform under longer ray-traced heavy gaming workloads, with the core idea to see how well the device sustains its performance over time. And again, the iPhone scores higher on all fronts over the S24 Ultra, with the Pixel unable to compete the test at all, unfortunately. Personally, I would probably take the stability of the iPhone over the little moments of better peak performance on the S24, but that's up to you. Google have shown that they have done really well with that stability too, but for the future G5 chips, I would like to see them attack that raw performance. Now, your phone's performance is only as good as its battery's ability to stay alive though, so which phone has the best battery life? Well, there have been multiple drain tests from a whole host of other top content creators out there, and you can look them up for more details, but in summary, here are the ones that I could find. Now, take all of these with a pinch of salt, because I personally don't know how they've conducted their own individual tests and the settings and environments they chose, and also how old or new their used or new S24 Ultra phones were, because battery can of course degrade depending on use and time, but the reoccurring theme here is that the Pixel and Samsung phones are much of a muchness, and both have seriously stellar battery life, but the iPhone 16 Pro Max leads the way. I do personally put battery life higher than charging speed, unless it's a 0 to 100% in 17 minutes jobby, like certain Xiaomi phones, for example. But if you are interested, in my experience, they're all slightly different, but the S24 Ultra is just under 1.5 hours to fully charge, whereas the other two are just over an hour and a half on average. And then there's software and ecosystem, and this is a tricky one. A lot has been made about the advancements Apple Intelligence will bring to the iPhone, but quite frankly, it's not available at launch, so I'll compare that with Galaxy AI and Google Gemini at a later date. So this is kind of an anti-AI part when it comes to software, which is iOS 18 and Samsung's One UI 6.1 over Android 14, Android 14 stock on the Pixel, because again, Android 15 isn't currently available. Now, if you're someone who craves customization, Android has always been the only real option, but with iOS 18, you can now, get this, move apps around your homepage without them snapping to the top. I know, right? Android definitely hasn't been able to do this since the dawn of time, but hey. However, it does work very well, and you can also make your icons larger without text if you prefer, and you can still choose colors and change light and dark themes which can also alter the display brightness too, and customizable widgets are there as well. Both the two Android phones are able to, of course, do this in a similar way too, and you still have the option of not only downloading apps from the Google Play Store, but also third-party apps from other sources for more niche apps and activities, something that's simply not possible on the iPhone 16 Pro Max. Because of this freedom, however, which I love for the record, it does leave you more open to possible security breaches if you do steer from the trusted Play Store. And even though you do have malware and security features in place on both of these two Android phones, the iPhone, with its more lockdown experience, creating software for one type of phone, their own, is probably slightly more secure. There are fewer potential weak points that can be exploited, with any issue easier to locate and fix quickly. The fact Android needs to be, by its very nature, a more open and workable system to be compatible with many different manufacturers and their devices means the task is slightly more difficult. Having said that, they both do a great job here. Samsung with their famous Knox platform present on the S24 Ultra, and the advanced fraud protection coming on Android 15 for them both. For the record, I do use one iPhone and one Android phone of choice at any one time for reasons that will hopefully become clear throughout this video. Preference currently being the iPhone 16 Pro, Desert Titanium, and the Pixel 9 Pro Fold, if you're interested. But one main reason for iPhone use, and this is still software related, is the fact that I still find many social media apps and just certain apps in general slightly more stable and ever so slightly better on iOS than Android, mainly because I would imagine app developers can optimize their software for one type of phone as opposed to Android, where it is either better or more poorly optimized depending on the individual device itself. On the flip side, both Google and Samsung can utilize cool software tricks like Circle to Search and things like AdMe and Best Take on the Pixel 9 Pro XL. In short, with software, there is no definitive winner, surprise, surprise, only mainly preference. iOS and Android share many great features, but they are just so different at the same time. And even the two versions of Android, One UI on the S24 Ultra and stock Android on the Pixel, have quite a few differences. So a lot of it will come down to subjective tweaks and how the phones interact with other devices as well that you might own in their respective ecosystems. Google produced smart home products, tablets, Pixel watches, Buds, etc. And Samsung with the likes of SmartThings integration and Galaxy Watch, Buds, tablets, TVs, and Apple with their AirPods, Apple Watch, MacBooks, iPads. And as soon as you start purchasing all of those accessories around that phone hub, it makes it incredibly difficult to switch. You'd also get these super cool fold options from Google and Samsung, the 9 Pro Fold and the Z Fold 6, respectively, in their ecosystems, so you can applaud their constant strive for innovation, but I don't really feel that's a factor in this comparison, as you would presumably either buy one of those or one of these. But I could be wrong, you could be stacking them up, and in that case, then that ecosystem might be better for you. I'm not calling this section, I'm sitting on the fence. When it comes to software and ecosystem, I'll give it a draw. The next category is additional features. Now, the Pixel 9 Pro XL doesn't really have any hardware additional features that I can think of, so it's really software again, with Gemini the key one, Google's AI integration. This runs mostly like an advanced voice assistant, think Google's version of ChatGPT. And some say it's more advanced for multimedia. I also think you get it for free for a year when you buy a Pixel 9 Pro XL, if that makes any difference to you. You also have Galaxy AI on the S24 Ultra, although a lot of that utilizes work from Google. So the obvious additional features here are the trusty S Pen and Samsung DeX, which I find slightly more useful than the promise of Apple Intelligence and the new camera control feature on the iPhone 16 Pro Max. You may have wondered why I didn't really mention that on the camera section of this video, and that's largely because I haven't really used it. I do think camera control is a really cool concept. I like the idea from Apple, but I think the slightly awkward placement of that button or non-button on the side of the phone and the fact I can still do all of those things on the screen itself mean that I don't really feel it's necessarily solving a problem that the S Pen and DeX can. And then there's price, which even though they are all fairly expensive, the small differences may still play an important factor in your choice. The Google 9 Pro XL is $999. The iPhone 16 Pro Max is $1149, and the S24 Ultra is $1249, which is pretty eye-watering considering a certain S25 Ultra will presumably be out in a few months. In conclusion, whether you should go and spend your hard-earned cash on a new iPhone 16 Pro Max, or a S24 Ultra, or a Pixel 9 Pro XL is, as I said at the start, pretty obvious. They are all incredible phones, but if you're a content creator with its superior video and audio, the iPhone 16 Pro Max is a bit of a no-brainer. Likewise, if you want more guaranteed performance, better battery, and marginally better app optimization, then Apple again might be the way to go. But you may prefer the display and additional features on the S24 Ultra, or the photo style of either of the two Android phones, the cheaper price and guaranteed stock Android, and Gemini right out of the block with the Pixel, and not the promise of that AI integration. I think the main decision maker still, though, is what other products you already own. If you have a lot of other Apple products, I know it's a cliche, but the walled garden is real. Apple may have recently finally included RCS on iOS 18 to make cross-platform messaging between iPhones and Android phones a little of a less jarring experience for all, and possibly ending the strange blue bubble, green bubble debate in the US. But quite frankly, if you enjoy using a MacBook, an iPad, AirPods, Apple Watch, AirTags, etc., and AirDrop, for example, with file sharing is just unrivaled, then the iPhone simply makes more sense, even if you do prefer the look or certain features of an Android phone. But on the flip side, if you're a Windows user, you have an Android watch, you get the idea. Luckily, I do get to use both platforms and all three of these wonderful phones, and definitely let me know how you scored this and which phone you would choose. Also remember, and this is important, the upgraded Snapdragon 8 Gen 4 chip is just around the corner, and subsequent Android phones that I will be getting my hands on, they might be pretty powerful again indeed. So subscribe for that content. It's going to be a very interesting few months. I, of course, was paid for this video by Apple and Samsung and Google, of course. So let the comments go wild. Like and subscribe if you did enjoy the video and found it helpful, and follow my other social media channels if you want more short form content on this and tech in general. My name's Adam, you've been the best as always. I love you and leave you. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers, peace out.